If you're miserable and not progressing the way you want to, the way you need to, I want you to stay with me here through the end of this video so you can see what I'm seeing as I hear from all the people in the channel, in my online community who engage with my content about patterns that are helpful and patterns that really just make people who want to heal feel miserable. Okay, so I notice two basic self-concepts out there. The first is what I notice in people who are working hard to figure out the problem caused by their experiences and to find the solutions that seem to help them get better. Now, not everything they've tried may have been helpful, but they're active in this project and noticing where they get lifted up and where they fall short. And when they comment, they'll tell you these little nuggets of wisdom. They'll say, you know, I tried X, I did Y, I did Z, and X was horrible. Y was okay, but Z was amazing, and that's what really helped me. And there are clear signs that someone is healing too, that they get along better with people, they feel more at ease in groups, or when they're alone, and their talents and gifts start emerging and filling up their lives with purpose and hopefulness. And a helpfulness for other people as well. And they'll begin to tell you that. So for this first group, they're subscribing to my channel because, and this is what they tell me, it's practical, it's solution-oriented, and it's based on not just theory, but real experience that they can relate to. They feel seen, they feel not alone anymore. I love that, I feel that way too. And for people who are having a breakthrough in their healing like this, it is so exciting to try out new tools, new ideas, and see if there's something in there that they can use. They want inspiration. They want to hear how other people heal. They want action steps. They're ready to go. Now, you can tell I'm very fond of this group, right? I also love the second group, but these are the folks where the breakthrough hasn't happened yet. They're good people. They've worked really hard on their healing, and a lot of them are knowledgeable about the treatments out there, and they've tried a lot of them, but the healing hasn't come yet. And so this group is really, really discouraged, and they come to feel helpless and hopeless, and you can see it in the comments they write. Now, deep down inside, they've stopped believing that healing is possible for them. And all that leaves them, and you see it in their comments, is bitterness. So people who are going through this will have a lot to say about things outside of themselves, family members, exes, society, the people who said they would help them but couldn't or wouldn't, anybody who made them feel unimportant and unseen and unloved. And that's all real, and I know it hurt them. People in this state of discouragement can tell you very clearly what's wrong with all this, what ought to change, and what their pain is like. They're very, very in touch with their pain. And most of us have been there. That's part of it, right, for all of us. But this second group, this discouraged and stuck group, what's also clear is that they have a very vague or non-existent concept of themselves, of what they would be like without that emotional pain. The pain becomes everything, as if it's who they are. And so they can't see themselves in a different future state where things have changed for the better. They can't even imagine it, what they might be like, what day-to-day life would feel like if they weren't trapped inside their own symptoms. So that's what I mean by stuck. Now, getting stuck in pain and isolation is a very traumatized thing to do. It happens to everybody sometimes. But if you want to break out of that, you have to do what I call breaking the wheel. And what I mean by the wheel is the churning, negative thinking and emotion states that go round and round with us. The blame, the obsession with people who hurt you, the struggles, the failures, the ways that you were never accepted or seen, and the stories that you told yourself over and over about why you are the way you are. And it's not that these stories are not true necessarily, but if we can't stop the spinning, the wheel just gets stronger and faster. And it's like a centrifuge, right? Something spinning that throws off and scatters everything that comes near it. It throws off people who love us. It throws off wonderful opportunities. It throws off financial security and joy, right? All gone. And the wheel is very seductive at the same time, and that's why I use this metaphor. You can't just slow the wheel down. You don't ask it a lot of questions or analyze the trajectory of everything that's flying around the room. You just have to take a big metaphorical stick and shove it in there and break that wheel. And don't worry, the wheel's made of air, and when you break it, the whole thing evaporates. It's not going to hit you in the face with fragments or anything. It just evaporates. It's gone. It's like waking up from a bad dream. You thought the wheel got the better of you, but it didn't. And you thought it protected you, but it actually just kept you stuck in pain and made you see nothing but helplessness. But you know what? You're not helpless. There's a whole wide world of experiences out there if you can get a little breathing room just to get started from that cycle of fear and anger and analysis and diagnosis and blame and then fear again. Thinking and talking about this stuff doesn't make it go away. It goes away, and remember, all you need is just a little bit of breathing room. It goes away when just for a moment you can just release the story. Open yourself up to a fresh and new experience of yourself and your capabilities in present time. The focus needs to come off of time past and other people and onto the only thing you can heal, which is yourself. And the knowledge that right here, right now, through practical steps, you open the door to that healing process by changing your mental state. Not helpless, hopeful. And for there to be hope, you need to have a vision, an ideal. You need to have a belief that healing is possible inside your own healing, whether or not other people change, whether or not circumstances change. This is the crucial sign that someone is on a good path. They recognize their own agency. Do you know that term? They begin to see choices that they can make, even when CPTSD puts nothing but hard choices in front of them. You always have a choice, and despite the symptoms you have today, you can move one foot in front of the other toward the healed life that you deserve. Now, you can choose to learn a new way to respond to the inevitable stressors and hardships of life. They will never stop. Life's going to keep throwing this stuff at you, but you can change. It starts in here. It starts in the way that you regard the possibility of your own healing. Can you see it? Do you believe it's possible that things could be better and easier in the future than they are right now? And are you willing to make some changes, starting with the way you talk to yourself about your trauma? Because if you're telling yourself that you're hopelessly screwed up, then whether you mean to or not, you're disconnecting with your life and all the people in it. People generally have a lot of compassion, but when they sense that negative wheel is spinning, it's like a hum. You can feel it in other people, right? And it makes you want to pull away. So it ends up isolating you when you go there. The very thing you're longing for isn't happening for you when that wheel is spinning. And you're like, why can I not get some support? Why doesn't anyone believe in me? Can't they see that I need some help? And that is a really hard place to be. And worst of all, that spinning wheel of negative ideas about yourself blinds you to who you really are, to all the good things that you're capable of bringing to this world. Your life is real. Your life is important. So how do you even begin? And this is one of the reasons childhood PTSD is so hard, is because it can make even little steps just seem overwhelming. And God forbid, there's a whole list of things that you need to do and you know it. It can be paralyzing. But if today you can just do one thing, I'll keep it really simple for you. Just get it into your mind what it will feel like when your PTSD reactions to life are reduced. You want to give it a try? Let's take a minute and I'll walk you through it. Imagine you're in a stressful situation. You're making a mistake at work, or visiting your family, or getting your feelings hurt by a friend who lets you down. Pick something that's both hard for you, but also that's likely to happen at some point in your future. It's realistic. Now, remember what it's like when your CPTSD triggers start firing up, and that wheel starts to spin. Here it goes. And you start getting dysregulated, and you start reacting in the old ways you hate. You feel tight, your heart races, you want to lash out, maybe you start getting numb, and you get scared that that same old part of you that always comes out when you're triggered is going to happen one more time, okay? Now, let that go. Now, imagine you're in that situation, the bad thing happens, but now your PTSD symptoms are 50% less. You feel a little rise when you're triggered, but it doesn't go over the top. You don't lose control. You still have choices about the words you say, your facial expression, the harsh thoughts that are going through your head. You can see them, but you can decide not to say anything in the moment. Would a 50% reduction in symptoms change how that all turned out? Okay, probably, right? Same situation, but this time let's take the symptoms down a little more to say 20% of what you're used to. What would that be like? The bad thing happens, you feel it, it hurts, but it doesn't carry you away. Would you be able to express yourself better? Would you be able to stay present and keep your choices? Could the relationship that in the past would have blown up in your face instead survive without damage, even though something hurt your feelings? Would it make a difference in your life if you could do that long term whenever stressful situations come up, right? Would strength in this area allow you to change some of your circumstances? Would it be easier then to make friends with people who fit you a little better than the ones you have right now in your life? And if that were all going well, could you imagine other things going well? Your relationship with a partner, your career, your physical health, your ability to share your gifts with the world. Well, now you just joined the ranks of the first group I mentioned. That's how you do it. The ones who can imagine a better future, and the ones who are more likely than anybody else to actually make it there. It starts by allowing yourself to believe that you're capable of changing your life. Childhood PTSD is, in its essence, an injury to our ability to connect with other people. Abuse and neglect early in our lives literally change our brains, and neglect in particular can physically restrict the normal processes that enable us to identify good, appropriate people to bring into our lives and to gradually open ourselves up to them and develop close and trusting relationships. This, to me, is the most tragic part of childhood PTSD. To be capable of love, but not to be able to sustain a normal, loving relationship is a devastating price to pay for what happened. But the great news is we can totally make progress in this area if we are intentional about it. If we just kind of leave it to chance and hope we'll figure out love later in our lives, or maybe when the right person comes along, we're not likely to improve. And in fact, if you look around, the people you know, you'll see a lot of older people who have actually deteriorated from being able to be close to others. If we don't work on this, we risk getting more and more cranky and isolated and hard on other people. And that's the tragedy. To me, the goal of life is to really learn to love other people. And it turns out that having and growing our connections with others is one of the most powerful ways we can heal our own PTSD. There's a large body of research emerging that shows that loving relationships actually help us heal our telomeres, the little caps on the strands of DNA that protect us from disease and slow down our aging. Love and connection are important for everyone, and especially for us who have so much catching up to do. Now, most people with PTSD have been hurt in this ability to connect, and if that's you too, then you're likely to struggle with relationships in proportion to the amount of time you spend in dysregulation. Dysregulation breaks connections. Re-regulation puts us in a place where we can begin to repair connections. As people whose ability to connect may be a bit wonky, we can definitely take steps to gradually heal this, and it doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes we have to be very intentional about it and work on it and take steps that are the opposite of the first impulse that comes to mind when we find ourselves struggling. Now, loneliness and feeling disconnection are universal experiences for everyone, at least a little bit, but for us, it can take over our lives. And this has everything to do with dysregulation, which makes connection very difficult, and re-regulation, which makes change in this part of ourselves possible. So we want to strike a balance, a healthy balance between solitude, which is the ability to tolerate and even enjoy our alone time, and connection with others. Because people with childhood PTSD tend to do a lot of things in extreme ways, and this is one of them. We isolate or live in deathly fear that people will leave us. We cling or we run away, and we might go one way with friends and the other way with significant others, but these extremes rob us of much of the good we're meant to have through our relationships with the people in our lives. Obviously, this is a huge topic, and I may make a whole course on it later this year, but for right now, here are some important things to remember in order, at the very least, to grow more regulated. So first, don't let yourself get too lonely. Every problem of your character will grow worse when you're in isolation. People who have cut everyone out of their lives seldom realize how weird they've become. Their rationale for avoiding everyone sounds plausible to them, but to the rest of us, it's just sad. It is a wish virtually everyone has when they know they're reaching the end of their lives. They'll say they wish they had given even more of their time and attention to loving relationships. So how can we grow closer to love in a realistic and gradual way that can be sustained? So not letting ourselves get too lonely is how we can grow closer to love in a realistic and gradual way that can be sustained. Loneliness taken to the extreme, and by that I mean we've convinced ourselves that we like the loneliness and we found ways to numb out the nagging worry and sadness about it. This kind of loneliness and pretending corrupts us in the end. And when we're lonely in life, it should feel lonely. The feeling of loneliness is a gift that nudges us to reach out and connect, to keep on trying, to keep getting out of the house when it's tempting to hide out there. So another suggestion is to make yourself connect with people face to face every day. Get out of the house, leave your normal space, and find a way to walk down the street and interact with the world. Also, become a great listener. When you're with someone, you actually don't have to talk about yourself half the time or even at all. If you can learn to give your full attention to the person who's with you and to really listen to them without jumping in with your own story or debating the legitimacy of what they're saying or any digressions at all, the connection between the two of you will get stronger. I mean, right in that moment, you will begin to feel closer. And real closeness will soften any impulses you have to cling to the other person or escape from them or try to control who they are. Now, some people go to the opposite extreme and they pour their whole identity into another person as if this is an extension of themselves. Now, not living in the center of your being carries huge risks because your own strengths are not being revealed and your own problems are not being exposed, which would cause you and your circumstances to evolve. Some people cling to relationships or they get obsessed or promiscuous. And this is every bit as deadening for their souls as having no one. In fact, it's probably worse. Nothing can derail your life so dramatically as sexual relationships with people who don't care about you. For women in particular, sex bonds us to others, whether we love them or even like them. I know there are exceptions to this rule, but I would not really hold up sex with no strings as anything you would want to try in order to become happier or better regulated. Romantic and sexual drama can dysregulate you as surely as violence can. Other people may be able to have casual sex, but for those struggling to regulate, I don't recommend it. Trusting intimate relationships take time. So if you're hooking up with people or getting together with them in a rush or impulsively in the name of having fun, or just to fill your weekend nights until the right person comes along, you're in for a world of struggle. This topic is going to be my next course, and I have a lot to say about losing one's way along the path to love and finding it again. But some quick tips for now, while you're really working on your childhood PTSD, include: notice the relationship between dysregulation and relationship status. Are you more or less regulated when you're with someone? Generally speaking, a conflict-filled relationship will create more dysregulation than being alone, and a harmonious relationship will lead to less dysregulation. An unstable relationship where you're in fear about getting left all the time will lead to more dysregulation, and a secure relationship will lead to less dysregulation. So harmonious, secure relationships are a positive path forward and something to strive for. And the trick of that is, being in a high-drama, abusive, or unstable relationship does not work to bide our time until the right person comes. These negative relationships actually take us way off that path. The right person will never find us, or if they do, our manner, our energy, the way we engage with others will be ragged from the days or years of difficulty we've had. So sometimes the shortest path to true love is found by being single for a while. So if you're single, or whatever is going on in your love life, and you experience a lot of loneliness, a very good and re-regulating thing you can do is to participate. Participate in your neighborhood, in your work life, in 12-step groups, in family get-togethers where you can be supportive of others. Practice love by being loving to others in little ways. If you're having trouble getting that started, here's a first step. Each day, find 2 people you can talk to in the line at the store or out on the sidewalk or on the phone, and contact them just to express something positive and supportive for them. Don't talk about yourself in this conversation, just show up for the other person. I guarantee you, if you do this twice a day, things will shift and you'll grow in your capacity to love, which can't help but lead to more connection. And in time, you'll find that that love is shining right back at you. Identifying and changing your self-defeating behaviors. Because here's the thing, this healing doesn't tend to happen all by itself when you don't even try. Now, it's not your fault that you were hurt like this, but now every bit of your courage is going to be needed because there are things to be faced and things only you can change. Do you know what I'm saying? The horrible irony of surviving abuse and neglect in childhood is that the more you were hurt back then, the more likely you are to adopt these self-defeating behaviors that make the effects of the original trauma even worse. These are things like the people you allow into your life, the way you take care of yourself, the choices you make about partners, jobs, money, where you live, the people you admire and listen to, the things you say, and of course, the way you act. Now, we all know how a rough childhood can increase the chances of really bad outcomes. I'm sure you know people who were hit even harder than you, people who are sick, addicted, isolated, involved in violence or worse. Now, when the healing never gets to begin, there's always a danger of that negative progression down, but that doesn't have to be you. You can turn that around into a positive progression and make the trauma stop. Now, maybe you're at that point, maybe you're not there yet. There just isn't time in any single video for me to cover everything that I teach in my courses and coaching. But I want to give you here some encouragement and hope by just describing the signs, what it looks like, what it feels like when you're not re-traumatizing yourself anymore, okay? And I teach this because for me, this was the hardest part of healing. I mean, yeah, the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid was bad. But in the end, it was the stuff I did to myself, the bad relationships, the chain smoking, the lashing out at people I cared about, all of that stuff. If you've taken my courses, you've heard my story. But I wasn't getting better for a long time because of all the hurtful situations that I kept putting myself in and sometimes dragging other people into. But then I changed. It didn't happen all at once. And I'm very far from being perfect today. I'm a work in progress just like anyone else. But if you're stuck in the pattern that I used to be in of just continually, involuntarily re-traumatizing yourself and not able to move forward, I just want you to know, I get it, I understand, and I'm here to show you a better way. Okay, so you want to hear some of the signs when you're healed from re-traumatizing yourself all the time? And remember, you're not going to have all of these, but you can see if you relate to some of them. All right, one is you no longer tend to see everything in black and white terms. People, yourself, situations, you don't anymore hold them up as all good or put them down as all bad, right? You begin to appreciate the complexity of things and the way people can have faults, but also be good people. And you'll have less outrage. That would be good. You'll have more curiosity. Also good. You'll have less impatience and more persistence. You'll lose the attraction to extreme views or authority figures who are really damning of other people. And you'll gain the ability to just interact with all kinds of people. Now, relationships where one person dominates the other, it might be you, might be them, those are going to become more equal or they're going to just totally fade out of your life. It's going to be less necessary to cut people out too, because the ones who don't fit you aren't going to get in the first place. So number 2 is you'll have a natural desire to care for your body. And part of this is because you'll have less drama and more energy to do things like exercise or floss your teeth or shop for clothes that actually look good on you. And you'll feel better. So that now when you end up staying up till 1 a.m. watching Netflix, it's just not going to feel worth it. And you'll have more strength to make a different decision the next night. It's going to become more possible to face addictions and to take action to overcome them. You know what you need to do is doing it, right? And when you're able to take at least small steps in the right direction, you start to get more clarity and more enthusiasm for your life, and then you want to do more good things. That's how it happens. So number 3 is, and this is another one where an old behavior will start to feel just ugh. And that's around the way you eat. And being at the effect of past trauma can lead to everything from obesity and eating disorders to a tendency to deal with stress by binging on carbs and sugar. And these foods can be calming at first, but take it from me, they end up being just yucky and dysregulating in the long run. And so as you heal, you're not going to want that feeling. And in fact, if sugar and carbs are your weak spot, like they are mine, I've included the quiz that I've been mentioning, the carb sensitivity quiz that I found that really helped me change my eating. I've put that down in the link, and you can find out if you're carb sensitive too. You can find that later. All right, number 4, you're going to lose the compulsive desire to binge on TV and video games and just looking at your phone all the time. Like a lot of us have that problem, right? If you're someone who's been into it long enough that it interferes with sleep, meals, job performance, or your ability to be present with people in your life, then, you could probably legitimately call it an addiction, and getting free from that is going to be life-changing for you. And I know I have to look into a screen to say this to you, and you have to watch a screen to hear it. So it's not always possible to eliminate it entirely, but everything in moderation, right? All right. The 5th sign that you're not re-traumatizing yourself anymore is that you won't be tempted to fudge the truth. Things like exaggerating, hiding important information about yourself, or even lying about things. Now, part of the reason is there's going to be nothing you need to hide or feel ashamed about when your life is cleared up a bit. You're not going to have so many problems, so you'll be comfortable being more honest about what's really going on. But it's also because just being real, being honestly yourself feels better. And you'll start to have an uncomfortable feeling when you're not being real. You'll want the truth to filter through your life. And if there's anyone in your life who still can't handle who you really are and how you really feel, it's going to be okay. Maybe they're not meant to be there. Maybe when they're gone, even though saying goodbye will be sad, there's going to be this big, nice space where people who totally get you and are okay with who you are can come in and be your friends instead. Okay. The 6th sign, that's hard to say. All right. Sign number 6 is that your work life will start to go better, and you won't stay stuck in unfulfilling work. You're going to change your relationship to that job or get the new one. And if a lack of work has been more the problem, all the good changes happening are going to make it easier to get work and earn money that supports you and the people who count on you. You're going to know how to steer clear of crap jobs and exploitative or abusive bosses. And you'll lose your appetite for conflicts on the job, the complaints, lawsuits, all that stuff. And just do good work and get along with people and be an encourager of your coworkers, as well as an advocate for yourself and your ideas when you need to, right? The 7th sign that you're done re-traumatizing yourself is that you'll lose interest in assigning blame to anybody, to yourself or other people for problems, and focus instead on finding good solutions. That's where all the power is. You're going to feel less angry, less irritable. And when something is your fault, it'll be easier to just own it and apologize. And when somebody owes you an apology, but they don't give it to you, you're not going to dwell on it. Blamey, complainy news and social media posts will start to put a really bad taste in your mouth. You're not going to want to read them. You're not going to want to write them. And the people in your life, they may not know why right away, but they're going to feel better about themselves when they're around you because you're safer. The 8th sign is that an attraction that you used to feel to unavailable partners and troubled people, it's going to let go of you. Now, I talk a lot about that in my courses, about healing relationships, but so much life damage is done by this one self-defeating behavior where you connect and bond and stay with people who are trouble, or you avoid any kind of intimacy with people at all, even though it's what you long for, or you abuse intimacy by acting out sexually, which is still a way of having no intimacy, right? Now, this is one part of CPTSD that can be hard to heal just by deciding to do it because it runs so deep. It cuts to the heart of the trauma wound. But when you've made real progress in other areas, it's going to be easier to stop re-traumatizing yourself in this one. The spell is broken, and there's peace when you're single. You're not afraid of it, and the possibility of harmony shows up, and real love when you do meet someone. The 9th sign is that you start to prefer just reality to fantasy. The tendency to check out by spending too much time in a fantasy romance or a fantasy business, rich and famous in the future. That kind of thing, it's really common when a person is in the middle of trauma, when they're really going through it. They just want to kind of take a little mental vacation there. But ultimately, it's just a way to avoid real problems that need you here to take action. So when you're healing, fantasy feels less necessary. And when you catch yourself daydreaming, you can come back right into the land where you can actually connect with people and put your goals into action, which is right here, right now. Now, finally, number 10 is that your material well-being starts to come together in a really good way. Now, most people in the world, including most happy people, live good lives without having a lot of money. Very few people have a lot of money. Financial hardship, too, can fall on pretty much anyone sometimes. But when you're free of trauma, it's more possible to earn a steady income, to let go of things like get-rich-quick schemes, and to live within your means, not get into debt. You can release the fear of the past, maybe from when you were a kid, maybe from more recently, when maybe homelessness was always a few $100s away, right? It all gets better. It gets better in little pieces, and then it starts getting better all at the same time. A little here, a little there. You can sleep at night. You can handle a hard day. You can hold your head up, even though you made a mistake, because you're not sabotaging yourself anymore in ways that make you feel fundamentally ashamed. This is what healing feels like when you're not re-traumatized all the time. I want to show you the big picture, what I've noticed from my own life and from teaching and coaching thousands of people who suffer with PTSD symptoms from childhood. And what I've noticed is that healing tends to flow through 5 crucial phases. Okay? So, the first phase of healing is to realize what trauma is actually doing to you. Obviously, everybody's different, but the effects of abuse and neglect in childhood tend to follow very common patterns. They're so common that I think you'll find it comforting to find out that no, a lot of your challenges and mistakes are not, as you may have thought, some kind of personal failure. When you learn the common effects of trauma, this is something I teach in all my courses, you're going to find out how many of your problems are normal. You can totally let go of all the blame on yourself. You don't have some kind of crazy preference for drama. You're not seeking out people who hurt you. You're not trying to recreate your childhood. Have you ever been told these things? The common symptoms of CPTSD from childhood are normal responses to abnormal circumstances during your developmental years. Yes, there are psychological elements. Yes, we sometimes sabotage ourselves, but at its root, CPTSD is a neurological injury that disrupts brain and body systems, and this affects your health. It can cause chronic disease, it can cause learning problems, relationship problems, financial problems, depression, anxiety, addiction, and this is a big one that gets overlooked. It can make it impossible to make clear-headed decisions right when you need to make a clear-headed decision. There's a lot of wrong information out there. You see it on TV and movies a lot. A traumatized person finally just talks about it and everything magically gets better. If only it were that easy, right? Of course, it looks from the outside like we just aren't seeing that we're traumatized. We're not admitting what's actually at the root of our problems. It looks like that because our actions don't make sense. We probably seem deluded, and it makes no sense that we would keep making the same self-sabotaging mistake over and over. So to someone who doesn't have CPTSD, it's easy to assume this is some kind of decision we're making or a choice. And if someone believes that, they can dress it up with all kinds of reasoning about why that would be. But the telltale sign that an idea or an assessment isn't really the right one in your case is that applying it doesn't do anything for you. Results matter. There might be a tiny puff of belief when you first hear an explanation for your symptoms. Oh, you just want things to be bad. But if you give it a few days and it still doesn't work, well, there it is. Knowing some idea of what's wrong with you is not a solution. If it doesn't lead to you healing, it might work for other people, but if it doesn't work for you, it's an idea, not a solution. And if your failure to respond to common treatments is making you feel ashamed, like there's something wrong with you, then internalizing this, it's just a misunderstanding. It's wrong information. This should come as a relief. We now have a much better understanding of what trauma actually does to people. You're not a bad person. You're normal. Your symptoms are not your fault. Knowing this is the first crucial phase of healing. The second phase of healing is to understand the root cause of your symptoms. For most people, this is dysregulation. Chronic stress and trauma in childhood can cause brain and nervous system changes that affect every system of the body. Those normally regulated systems become dysregulated. And you'll hear me use that word all the time, dysregulated. There's emotional dysregulation and there's neurological dysregulation, including dysregulation of brain activity from like a flowing pattern to a chaotic pattern. And this in turn leads to dysregulation of hormones and chemical signals that govern your immune system, your heart function, your reproductive system, your metabolism, your attention span, your ability to stay calm and present and not melt down emotionally, or your tendency to totally space out at crucial moments. And in this stage of healing, you learn to notice when dysregulation is happening. What are the signs that you have it? What triggers seem to set it off? This sets off a huge wave of growth for the people that I work with, just like it did for me. They'll often say, oh my God, that's what I have. No one's ever described this before. And it's the dysregulation that throws me off every time. Now, if you have that, that's what's made it almost impossible to stop making those same mistakes. It's made it impossible to solve problems in your life that seem to just hang around or get worse, even though you do everything right. It's the dysregulation, and guess what? You can learn to re-regulate. You can learn to do that. It's strange at first, and it'll surprise the heck out of you to find that simple techniques can stop a trigger from turning into an upset and then a full day or 3 days of dysregulation. You might still get dysregulated sometimes, but you'll notice it sooner, and you'll be able to turn it around quickly and get back to being okay and doing what you're doing, focusing, being calm. When you're regulated, you're a lot less likely to lose your temper or have an anxiety attack or feel overwhelmed or overeat. You have a way out of all that. And when you're free, so many things in life become possible. I love teaching people about this in my coaching programs because it's one thing to read about how to re-regulate or watch a video about it, but being in a small group, connecting every week with people who know you and sharing what you're trying, what you're noticing, having people hear you and be happy for you, and sharing their discoveries about what works. You know, I get to see this light go on in everyone's eyes, like, oh, that's it. We're not failures. We're not stupid. We're dysregulated. And this can be healed. And we watch each other do it. You can see this transformation in people. And so that is the third crucial phase of healing, learning to connect with other people. This is probably the single harshest impact of childhood trauma on your adult life. Feeling like an outsider, feeling like you didn't get the memo on how to act, or you're good at acting like you're fine, but you never feel like you're safe to be yourself. You feel lonely, even in a crowd. And of course, romantic relationships can be dreadful for us. We can get obsessive. We could end up having no relationships. It's not supposed to be this way. And I say it again and again, childhood PTSD is an injury to our ability to connect with other people. It's an injury, but this capacity to connect can be learned. When you're more regulated, it's easier to connect, and it works the other way. More connection, handled slowly and consciously, can help you get more regulated. So healing is kind of an upward spiral. It's not a straight line. And sometimes it goes fast and then slow and fast and slow, but you can keep progressing if you stick with it. The fourth crucial phase of healing is all about facing your own self-defeating behaviors. Do you ruin relationships with anger? Are you isolating? Do you have addictions or a problem with food and weight that's hurting your health? Do you feel stuck in an abusive relationship? These are all trauma related, and a lot of traumatized people stay stuck with these problems all their lives. When you're re-regulated and connected a little more, you can begin to change these. That is sacred and honorable work, to keep facing your own mistakes. Don't be shy of it. It feels good, making day-to-day changes in a positive direction. This is where life starts to get much more open, much more happy. And then comes the fifth crucial phase of healing. And that's when you're able to shed your old, limited idea of yourself, stuck in resentment or hopelessness or paralysis or trying to please people who are never going to be pleased with anything you do anyway. This is the phase where you're able to discover who you really are, the real you, and the gifts that you were meant to bring into the world. This is the phase of joy and sharing and healing with others. The biggest obstacle in my experience is self-sabotage, because when you're undermining yourself, it doesn't matter what else is going on or what help you're getting. Your healing gets blocked. And it's really normal. Self-sabotage isn't just this bad thing we do, it's part of having CPTSD. It's part of it. For example, you might block your own healing with self-defeating behaviors. We all do it sometimes, and up to a point, we can probably keep making progress anyway. But the fact is, a lot of people with CPTSD are walking around not healing, still being stuck, getting more stuck, more disconnected, more angry, and more suppressed from ever becoming happy or fulfilled or becoming the person they were meant to be. So there are things you can do right now to start changing the direction of your life. And in this video, I want to talk about the ways you might be self-sabotaging your own healing and teach you what to do to stop doing that. Okay? Are you ready? All right, the first thing, and this one's been made harder for you lately, but it's time to stop isolating. And if you're like most people with CPTSD, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you get triggered by other people, and it can be really hard to show up with an open heart and an open mind in social situations and to make the kind of connection with other people that supports healing. There's this huge temptation to pull back from other people, and you might be isolating overtly and hide out in your house, or you might be isolating covertly and then acting like you're available and friendly, but secretly avoiding invitations and personal openness and commitments with other people. But whether it's overt or covert, the result is the same. You end up alone. And as much as you may find it hard, you need other people in the mix to be reflecting back to you and interacting with you so that you can progress in your healing. And isolation is funny. It's caused by trauma and it causes trauma. And I know a bunch of you are going to say isolating is the only way to stay safe from the kind of mistreatment you went through in the past. And in one way, you're right. If you don't have contact with people, you can't be mistreated. But you also can't heal, really. So there comes a time, if you're going to stop sabotaging yourself, that you've got to stop causing trauma and let people in a little bit. And what I suggest to you is that you titrate. Titrate, that's a word I've borrowed from the medical world, and it means to just do a tiny bit at a time and see how you do, and then do another tiny bit. And you can make this easier and help yourself get stronger and more flexible around people if you can, and at the same time, learn to calm those triggers. And if you want a way to do that, you can go take my free course. There's a link to it below this video and all my videos. It's called Free Tools. It's a page on my website. The Free Tools page is always linked down below in the description section. And it teaches you 2 simple techniques you can use every day to have less fear, less anger, and to become just more free to connect with people and have fun and be yourself. That's the object of the game. Okay, so the second thing you're doing that's sabotaging your healing is staying stuck in your sad stories. And I know that it is sad, and I know you were told that telling these stories and exploring them and feeling your feelings about them, that if you could just do it enough times and for enough years, that someday you would feel better. And if it worked and you're just sitting here watching this video about how to stop sabotaging your healing, but now let your story be less about what happened to you and more about you now and all that you're doing with your life. Now, there's definitely a time and a place to talk about what happened, and it can be very healing when it's the right time and in the right measure. But I have not found that talking about it kept delivering returns. It needs to be acknowledged and shared, for sure. But also, we need to feel better today and to create a life that we like. And we want to connect with other people, to love and be loved by them, And the thing is, when the sad stories are dominating your life and your consciousness and your identity, you can't really do that. You're not present. You can't really pay attention to the lovely person who might be right in front of you. We don't always have good boundaries around the sad stories. And to be honest, that can make us feel very negative to be around. So I'm not telling you to deny what happened, but if you've talked it to death and you still feel like your healing is stuck, maybe all that talking has turned into self-sabotage. And it's time to focus on you now in ways that you can start making things better in your work, in your relationships, and in your sense of meaning. Those are totally important. Okay, the third thing to do if you want to stop self-sabotaging is to stop the angry outbursts of negative emotions. Now, I know you have things to feel angry about. You do. And what happened to you can't be erased. But there's an anger that's common with CPTSD that can be made monster-sized when you're overwhelmed or when you're feeling threatened, pounding pillows when you're angry, venting, screaming. Was that ever suggested to you? Well, some researchers at Iowa State University have showed what some of us always suspected about that, or what we noticed in our own experience. It not only doesn't reduce anger, it makes it worse. So nothing will destroy your relationship and your career and your mental health faster than lashing out from that traumatized place. Now, if you were traumatized as a kid, I know, and I don't even have to explain this to you, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you've done it. It's almost certainly been done to you, and it's poison. So yes, there are reasons to be angry. There are present-day things that might make you legitimately angry. So yes, there are reasons to be angry. There are present-day things that might make you legitimately angry when you're insulted or cheated, that kind of thing. And there were past things that happened that weren't fair, that you feel damaged you or robbed you of wholeness, that you worry that you never can find or replace. And I don't blame you for having anger, but here's the thing. What happened to you can never be totally set right because it's past. You can't change the past. And so your healing depends ultimately on you facing that reality, doing what you can about it, and then with every bit of strength that you have, to use your energy to forge a good and happy life. Your happiness doesn't depend on getting revenge or getting an apology. You probably will never have those things, but you can become happy by not damaging your life anymore. You can be happy by blossoming into your real self, being you, using your talents and developing your gifts so that you can work and give love and serve the world in the unique way that only you can. We can do it in 1,000 ways, but we need to be useful. That is a need we have as humans. And from there, the anger has a way of working itself out of your heart, out of your mind, out of your cells, so that you can be free. Okay, the fourth thing to stop doing is to stop being in bad relationships. And I know it's easier said than done. We are way inside the easier said than done land when I say that, but I'm going to tell you straight, if you're going to heal, you've got to stop being in abusive, chaotic, disrespectful, non-mutual, and breadcrumb relationships. To keep seeking them out, it's just like the definition of insanity, right? So staying in them is also something terrible. I would say staying in a relationship like that is spiritual death. When you know something is killing you or harming the other person, but you stay anyway, there's an injury to your integrity and your self-respect that will sabotage anything else that you're trying to do in your life. Are there reasons to stay? Children, illness come to mind. I'm not going to list them all here, but I'm suggesting you look at the fact, and I know you know this, that when you believe that you have no choice but to stay in an abusive, exploitive, or damaging relationship, it's probably your past trauma talking. And for you to heal, some stronger part of you needs to rise up and see the situation for what it is and get you out of there. The fifth thing you want to get free of is a tendency to run away from challenges and opportunities. Sometimes it seems like it's going to feel so good. And how many times have you turned away from a potentially good thing, a job, a relationship, telling someone how you feel about them, because you had to fear that your CPTSD symptoms would just rise up and destroy you if you did it wrong, if you messed up, or if you realized it was a bad idea or you got rejected. Putting ourselves out there and living our lives always, always involves the risk of failure. And the horrible thing about living with dysregulation and CPTSD is that failure is a risk we feel that we can't afford. And I'm not going to give you some personal development pep talk that you just have to be tough or strong or believe in yourself. You are tough, but what's needed to cope with failure and to not sacrifice everything to avoid is a way to offload that tsunami of emotion just enough that you're actually okay with what's happening. That's the secret. When your CPTSD is totally untreated and you're dysregulated and life is shaky, no, you can't afford to lose anything, so you don't try. But when you're active in the process of healing and when you're supported by a friend or two or three who know what your challenges are, who know why it's so worth it for you to keep taking your next brave steps, when you know how to calm your triggers, you can afford to take the risk. The only way to grow and learn is to try things. And the only way to bear the possibility that most of what you try isn't going to work out, it's just to embrace yourself as somebody who tries and to have a really good way to find ease inside when it is hard. Now, compared to the memories and emotions approach, where you would get asked, tell me what happened in your childhood and what feelings come up for you around that. These are not irrelevant questions, but the approach I'm about to show you more accurately targets the real problem with childhood PTSD or complex PTSD. That's what it's called when the trauma symptoms come from long-term ongoing exposure to intense stress, which is what happens for abused and neglected kids. And the approach that I'm going to show you points you more directly to the spots where you need healing and where healing is actually possible, right? You can't change what happened in the past, but you can work on healing your symptoms right now. And present time is a powerful place to be when you're healing. And as a survivor of early trauma myself, I can tell you firsthand how important it is to have tools in your hands all the time, tools to help you handle CPTSD symptoms right when they're happening, not just in weekly appointments, if you're even lucky enough to have those, but right now, on your sofa, in your car, on the bus, at work. We have to have a way to get relief from that intense distress when the old stuff is triggered. We are so vulnerable in those moments. And when we're triggered is when all the bad stuff happens. The emotional outbursts that hurt our relationships, the terrible choices, the loss of focus that has cost us money and time and progress in our careers. I mean, if you had a way to prevent the life catastrophes that have happened for you when your CPTSD symptoms were triggered, your life could be very, very different. Do you agree? So I'll come back to triggers in a moment. But any solution that's genuinely going to help you heal the trauma and turn around the damage that it's caused you in your relationships, your career, your family life, your mental and physical health, it has to both give you relief now and it has to give you a way to make lasting changes so that a year from now or 10 years from now or even a month from now, you can look back and say, yeah, I'm happier and stronger and more free now to live the way that I want to live. Now, I'm not talking about external circumstances. I'm talking about internal limitations. The way that we avoid sticking our necks out to go for what we want. We latch onto sick relationships and then we don't leave. We spend years avoiding people and social situations that are hard for us just because it's too triggering. Now, if your CPTSD symptoms are going to pop up every time you try to expand your life, it really is safer to avoid life. So you can see how we got into this kind of scared, stuck, oh, what's the point place where we don't do what we want to do. We might be holding on to justifications for playing it small, like, oh, people are so awful, or the world never gives a chance to people like me. But the truth is that when we haven't learned to manage and heal our CPTSD symptoms, making our world small is pretty much our only defense against triggers that we can't control. Now, you're probably like me. You've tried, you've railed against the world. You've probably noticed that it's actually not really possible to make triggering events stop happening. Not forever. You leave one situation, then you get yourself into another one. The triggers are going to keep coming because that is the nature of life. That's how the world is. All you can really change is your triggered reaction, your response. And when you no longer get triggered by certain things that flood you with adrenaline and emotion and throw you onto shaky ground, when you no longer get triggered by it, it's not a trigger anymore. That's how you get free. Whether you tell the story of your past trauma 3 times or 1,000 times, it's your triggered reaction to events that are beyond your control that will block your healing every time. So how do you diffuse the triggers? I'm going to tell you how I've done it for myself and what I teach my students. Obviously, people are different and there are many approaches, but I've tried to keep it really simple and doable and have therefore narrowed it down to just 3 aspects of complex PTSD. These aspects are where I believe the trouble all is concentrated. They're the primary manifestations of our adult symptoms, and likewise, they're the big areas of opportunity for healing. It's where you can focus. And the 3 things are: 1, dysregulation of the brain, nervous system, and emotions. 2, difficulty forming and handling relationships with other people. And 3, a tendency to fall into self-defeating behaviors. So dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behaviors. I call these the trauma trifecta. It's kind of a goofy term, but it works to describe the 3 sources of virtually all of our CPTSD-related problems: dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behaviors. These 3 affect every level of our being: our thoughts, our emotions, our work, our relationships, our neurology, our physiology, basically everything. Now, we know scientifically that all these parts of life are directly impacted by past trauma. But what's causing that? What's causing the symptoms right now? It's not the past directly anymore. It's our ingrained reaction to day-to-day life right now. And this is good news because it's pretty hard to change the world when you're focusing all your healing on other people and the past. Those are 2 things you cannot change. You might learn more or make discoveries about why you are the way you are, but healing is rarely cognitive. It's not all about knowing. I wish it were. A lot more people would be healed. We know a lot. Healing might involve knowing, but mostly it's about changing, taking action, practicing, strengthening your ability to re-regulate yourself, to form good relationships with other people, and to set boundaries, and to just stop sabotaging yourself with destructive choices. They cause waste and tragedy in your life. They set you back from everything you're trying to do. The focus has to shift from what other people did to what we are doing that re-traumatizes us, and what we're not doing that needs to be done if we're going to become our real selves and live life for real. It's easier said than done, I know, but that's how we heal. It's totally possible. That's why I'm saying recovering old memories and feeling your feelings, it's nice, it's part of the journey, but it isn't going to be enough. What we need is more concrete and present time solutions than that. What we need is a way to get emotional relief right away when we're triggered. We need a way to neutralize triggers so we're not held hostage by people and circumstances we can't control just because they set us off. And we need to honestly face the life problems that have piled up in our lives. That's what happens when you have CPTSD. You get life problems and there's no way out but through. These 3 things, dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior, have a way of flowing into each other. One causes the other, and that in turn makes the other thing worse. And what they all have in common, and this is important because this is where we have, an opportunity to break that cycle. What they have in common is that they're all activated by triggers. If you don't get triggered, these tendencies may not even show up from day to day. When you're calm and you don't dysregulate, and that in turn makes it easier to connect to people, and feeling connected calms the tendency towards self-defeating behavior, and that leaves you calmer and more regulated, well, that is how the path to healing unfolds. One step after another, they flow. So for right now, where do you start? Where can you break that cycle? Where can you strike a crack into it and change the dynamic? The answer is absolutely anywhere in the circle. You can start anywhere you find the opportunity. You can learn to re-regulate. I have a free course to get you started on that, the daily practice. I'll link that in the description section too. You can change a self-defeating behavior. Maybe start with something easy to change, or you can practice being more present with people who are in your life right now and consciously develop your capacity to feel connected. Any one of these little things you do will have a ripple effect and make it easier to do the next thing, which can be anywhere else in the circle. You don't have to push so hard that you freak out and give up. Don't do that. Just take small steps every day. There is no more powerful strategy for integrating real change in your life over time than small steps taken consistently. You'll hear me say that over and over again. What doesn't work is just avoiding the whole thing and trying to get to the end of your life without more trouble. All right? You've probably already spent some time doing that, and that's sad. What doesn't work is raging or venting or demanding that people apologize or change so that you don't have to feel your triggers. Nobody could blame us for wanting that, but I'm telling you, it doesn't fix CPTSD, and it doesn't work to blame other people for giving you the wrong kind of help. You're always going to need your own tools. The solution is to get more regulated, more connected, and more committed to supporting yourself. You're a good soul, no matter what you struggle with. I'm about to outline for you 5 crucial stages of recovery. And this is not just based on what has worked for me personally. I've worked with thousands of other people, showing them my techniques, teaching principles that may sound at first kind of counterintuitive, and reading and learning what researchers are discovering about the nature of trauma and what's really going on in the brain. Because that is where, in my experience, healing has to begin. You can't intellectually figure out your own healing with a brain that's giving you wrong signals because your CPTSD isn't treated. It's a vicious cycle, right? So you'll hear me say both CPTSD and childhood PTSD, and they're not exactly the same thing. Childhood PTSD is a subset, but it's a term that almost everybody understands. So you start with brain healing. And when that started for me, I had the astonishing experience of just popping out of my trauma state. At first, it was just like little periods of time, and then it got longer and longer. And then it was enough to start healing the other effects of trauma. And it's necessary to do that healing if you want to stay healed and change your life. And now working with other people, I've seen hundreds and hundreds go through a very similar process, a path that's both steady, it goes forward slowly and steadily, and it's also punctuated with dramatic steps forward. And early on, there's often this kind of like popping out of it, an epiphany. It's a realization or a little burst of healing that happens when you suddenly release an old and wrong idea that's blocking you from the path that's now going to take you to that place of ease and confidence and possibility. It sounds good, right? If you're skeptical, that's good. That's right and appropriate, because healthy boundaries mean you shouldn't let anyone override your best judgment about how to heal, especially people on YouTube, right? But just so you can assess my approach, I'll lay out for you the 5 crucial phases of healing. And you can incorporate this into all the good stuff you're already doing, and you don't have to change anything. Or if you don't have anything that's working for you yet, you can just make this what you're doing and see if this works. All right. So the first phase of healing is to realize what trauma is actually doing to you. Now, obviously, everybody's different, but the effects of abuse and neglect in childhood tend to follow very common patterns. They're so common that I think you'll find it comforting, really, that no, a lot of your challenges and mistakes are not some kind of personal failure. And when you learn the common effects of trauma, and this is something I teach in all my courses, you're going to find how many of your problems are normal. You can totally let go of all the blame because it's not your fault. And you don't have some kind of crazy preference for drama. You're not seeking out people who hurt you, and you're not trying to recreate your childhood. Have you ever been told these things? I mean, really. The common symptoms of CPTSD from childhood are normal responses to abnormal circumstances during your developmental years. You did not do this to yourself. Yes, there are psychological elements, and those can in turn into self-sabotaging behaviors. And I deal with that a lot too in my courses and coaching programs. But at its root, CPTSD is a neurological injury that disrupts brain and body systems. And then that in turn affects your health. It definitely affects your health. It can cause chronic disease. It can cause learning problems, relationship problems, which you've noticed, financial problems, depression, anxiety, addiction. And this is a big one that gets overlooked, for example. It can make it impossible to make clear-headed decisions right when you need to make a clear-headed decision, when you're stressed. Now, there's a lot of wrong information out there. You see it on TV. It just drives me crazy in movies and TV. A traumatized person finally just talks about it to some therapist or friend, and just because they talked about it, everything magically goes away and they're better. And I wish it were that easy, right? And it's a little different than that. But of course, it looks like it should work from the outside. It looks like we just aren't seeing that we're traumatized, or we're just not getting something. It looks like that because we say one thing, but then our actions are kind of different. We probably seem like we're deluded when we're taking action. And we keep making the same self-sabotaging mistakes over and over again, even though we said we wouldn't. So to someone who doesn't have CPTSD, it's easy to assume that this is some kind of decision we're making or a choice. And if someone believes that, then they kind of have to make it work for themselves by dressing it up with all kinds of psychological reasoning or rationales about why that would be. Oh, it's really just this. But, the telltale sign that an idea or assessment isn't really the right one in your case is that when you apply it, it just doesn't do anything for you. Results tell you something. There might be a tiny puff of belief or excitement when you first hear an explanation for why you're having problems. But when you give it a few days or weeks and you try the technique and then you see it doesn't work, well, there it is. It doesn't work. Now, knowing something, even if it's true, is not the same thing as having a solution. Especially, if it doesn't lead to your healing, it's not a solution. It might work for other people, but if it doesn't work for you, it's just an idea. And if your failure to respond to common treatment is making you then feel ashamed or different, then it's really important to internalize that whole thing, that treatment was supposed to work for you, it's a misunderstanding. It's wrong information. Let that come to you as a relief. You're normal. You're you. And that is the first crucial phase of healing. Now, the second phase is to understand the root cause of most of your symptoms, and that is something called dysregulation. Okay? Chronic stress and trauma in childhood can cause brain and nervous system changes that affect every system in your body. Those normally regulated systems become dysregulated. You'll hear me use that word all the time, dysregulated. There's emotional dysregulation. There's dysregulation of brain activity from a flowing pattern into a chaotic pattern. There's dysregulation of hormones and chemical signals that govern your immune system, your heart function, your lung function, your reproductive system, your metabolism, your attention span, your ability to stay calm and present and not melt down emotionally or totally space out at crucial moments. Now, in this stage of healing, you learn to notice when dysregulation is happening. What are the signs that you have it? What are the triggers that seem to set it off? And this begins a huge wave of growth for the people I coach. That's what it did for me too. They'll often say, dysregulation? Oh my God, that is what I have. That is what is throwing me off every time. And if you have that, that is very probably what's made it almost impossible to stop making those same mistakes or to solve the problems in your life that just seem to hang around and get worse, even though you're doing everything a person is supposed to do. It's the dysregulation, and guess what? You can learn to re-regulate. You can learn to do that, and it's strange at first, and it'll surprise the heck out of you to find that simple techniques can stop a trigger from turning into a big upset and then a full day or 3 days of dysregulation. You might still get dysregulated, but you'll notice it sooner and you'll turn it around more quickly, and then you can get back to being okay and doing what you're doing. When you're regulated, you're a lot less likely to lose your temper or have an anxiety attack or feel overwhelmed. Is that a big one for you? You have a way out from all that. And when you're free, so many things in life become possible. Now, I love teaching people about this in my coaching program because it's one thing to read about how to re-regulate or to watch a video about it, but being in a small group, just connecting every week with people who know you, sharing what you're trying, what you're noticing, having people hear you and be happy for you, and sharing what they're discovering about what works. well, I get to see this light go on in everyone's eyes like, that's it. One by one, they're getting it. We're not failures. We're not stupid. We're dysregulated. And this can be healed. And so that is the third crucial phase of healing, to learn to connect with other people. This is probably the single hardest thing because it's the worst impact area of childhood trauma on adults. Feeling like an outsider, for example, feeling like you didn't get the memo on how to act, or you're good at acting like you're fine, but you never feel like you're safe to be yourself. You feel lonely, even in crowds. And of course, romantic relationships, for so many of us, are dreadful or obsessive or non-existent, right? It's not supposed to be this way. I say it again and again, childhood PTSD is an injury to our ability to connect with people, and connection can be learned. Now, when you're more regulated, it's easier to connect, and it works the other way too. More connection helps you get more regulated. So the fourth crucial phase of healing is all about facing your own self-defeating behaviors. Like, do you ruin relationships with anger? Are you isolating? Do you have addictions or a problem with food and weight that's hurting your health? These are all trauma related, and a lot of traumatized people stay stuck with these problems all their lives. But when you're regulated and connected a little more, you can begin to change these things. And that's an honorable and holy project, to keep facing your own mistakes and making day-to-day changes in a positive direction. This is everything. This is where life starts to get much more open and much happier. And then comes the fifth crucial phase. And that's when you're able to shed your old limited idea of yourself, stuck in resentment or hopelessness, or identified with the trauma, or feeling paralyzed about taking action, or trying to please people who, come on, man, they're never going to be pleased with anything you do. This is the phase where you're able to discover who you really are, the real you, and the gifts that you were meant to bring into the world. You probably have inklings of what your gifts are, but the burden of CPTSD has been just too heavy to develop them, right? So in the intensive coaching programs we do here, we take people all the way through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the phases. And this is the greatest pleasure of all, is watching each person's power and their dignity be restored and start to shine, because they can see not just the old identity of someone who was hurt, but their true identity. They're people who can accomplish great things for the benefit of the world. And we get to watch as people come in with this kind of hard edge of feeling like life is meaningless and empty and threatening. And as they gradually sort of lighten up and drop the burdens and then start to shine like that, there's just nothing better. So you want to hear some of the signs when you're healed from your CPTSD symptoms, okay? You're not going to have all these signs, but you can see if you relate to some of them. All right. One is you no longer tend to see things in black and white terms. People, yourself, situations, you no longer hold them up as all good or put them down as all bad. And you begin to appreciate the complexity of things, the way people can have faults but be decent people anyway. You'll have less outrage and more curiosity. We could really use more people in the world like that right now. You'll have less impatience and more persistence. You'll lose the attraction to extreme views or authority figures and gain the ability to interact with a variety of people. Relationships where one person dominates will become more equal, or they'll fade away, and it will become less necessary to cut people out of your life. Number 2 is you'll have a natural desire to care for your body. Part of it is because you're going to have less drama and more energy to do things like take a walk or floss your teeth or shop for clothes that actually look good on you. And you'll feel a little better. And so now when you're feeling too schlumpy to leave the house, or you're tired from watching TV really late, it'll feel not worth it anymore. It'll become more possible to face your addictions and take action to overcome them. One little step after the other will lead to more clarity and more enthusiasm for life, and you'll want to do more good things for yourself. Isn't that cool? Number 3 is, and this is another one where an old behavior will start to feel awful, and that's around the way you eat. Being at the effect of past trauma can lead to everything from obesity and eating disorders to a tendency to deal with stress by binging on carbs and sugar. And these foods can be calming at first, but they can become dysregulating in the long run. And as you heal, you won't want that feeling. And in fact, if sugar and carbs are your weak spot, I've got a quiz to suggest to. And in fact, if sugar and carbs are your weak spot, I've got a quiz called the Food Sensitivity Quiz from Susan Pierce Thompson. I'll put that into the description section below. Number 4 is you'll lose that compulsive desire to binge on TV and video games and just plain looking at your phone all the time. If you're someone who's been into that stuff enough to interfere with your sleep or your eating or your job or your ability to be present with the people in your life, then the release from screen addiction will be life-changing for you. And I know I have to look in a screen to say this to you, and you have to watch a screen to hear it. That's true. But everything in moderation, right? All right, the 5th sign that you're healing your CPTSD is that you won't be tempted anymore to fudge the truth. Things like exaggerating or hiding important information about yourself or even lying about things. And part of the reason is there's going to be nothing that you need to hide or to feel ashamed about. You won't have so many problems, so you'll be comfortable being more honest about what's going on in your life. But it's also because just being real, being honestly yourself feels better, and you'll start to have real discomfort when you're not being real. You'll actually want the truth to filter through your life. And if there's anyone still in your life who can't handle who you really are and how you really feel, then, that's okay. Maybe they're not meant to be there. So maybe when they're gone, even though saying goodbye is going to be sad, there's going to be a big, nice space where someone who loves you and accepts you can be. The 6th sign that your CPTSD is healing is that your work life will start to go better, okay? You won't stay stuck in unfulfilling work. You'll change your relationship to that job or you'll get a new one. And if a lack of work has been your problem, all the good changes happening will make it easier to get work and earn money that supports you and the people who count on you. As you heal, you're going to learn how to steer clear of exploitative or abusive employers. And you'll lose your appetite for conflicts on the job. You'll get the ability to show up, to do good work, to be an encourager of your coworkers, and to be an advocate for yourself and your ideas when you need to. It's going to feel good. You can hold your head up and feel proud of your work. The 7th sign that your CPTSD is healing is that you're going to lose your interest in assigning blame to yourself or other people for problems. And you're going to focus instead on finding good solutions. You'll feel less angry about the situation. You'll feel less irritable. And when something is your fault, it's going to be easier to just own it and apologize. And when someone else owes you an apology, but they don't give it to you, you're not going to dwell on it. Most people don't ever apologize. And when you have peace inside, you're not going to worry about that too much. Another thing you're probably going to want to steer clear of, it'll become uncomfortable, is blamey news and social media posts. And the people in your life may not know why, but they're going to feel better about themselves when they're around you and you don't engage in that sort of blame thinking. The 8th sign that you're healing is that any attraction you once had to unavailable partners and troubled friends is going to let go of you. I talk a lot about this in all my videos about healing relationships, but so much life damage is done by this one self-defeating behavior, which is connecting and bonding with and staying with people who are trouble. Or you end up avoiding any kind of intimacy with people at all, even though it's what you long for. Or you abuse intimacy by acting out, all right? Playing the field so much that you cause yourself to have no intimacy. This is one part of CPTSD that can be hard to heal just by deciding to change. And it cuts to the heart of the trauma wound, is how we relate in romantic relationships, romantic and sexual relationships. But when you've made real progress in other areas, it's going to be easier to stop re-traumatizing yourself in these ways. The spell is broken. You're not going to believe that, some other person is the panacea who's going to solve all your problems. There's more peace when you're single, and the possibility of harmony and real love starts to appear on the horizon when you do meet someone, because you have that peace. All right, the 9th sign that you're healing is that you start to prefer reality to fantasy, and the tendency to check out by spending too much time in a fantasy romance or fantastical dreams of business success. It's really common for people in the middle of trauma, but in the end, it's just another way to avoid real problems and the actions that you need to take. When you're healing, it feels less necessary. And when you catch yourself daydreaming, you can come back where you can actually connect with people and put your goals into action, which is right here, right now. And finally, number 10, the sign that you're healing is that your material well-being starts to come together in a positive way. Now, most people in the world, including most happy people, live good lives without being rich or famous, and some people live on very little money at all. Financial hardship can actually fall on anyone, but when you're free of trauma, it's more possible to earn a steady income, let go of get-rich-quick schemes that are just fantasy, and live within your means, and release the fear of the past when maybe you were a few $100s away from homelessness too many days out of the year, right? I know when I was a kid, we had a lot of fear about that. It took me years to lose that. It all gets better at the same time, a little here, a little there. You can sleep at night, you can handle hard days, you can hold your head up even though you make mistakes because you're not sabotaging yourself in ways that make you feel ashamed. And this is what healing feels like when you're not re-traumatized all the time. You're not in CPTSD. So don't get discouraged. There are things you can do to start your healing right now. Okay, number one mistake that you don't want to make is don't make your CPTSD your identity, all right? The trauma in your life happened to you, but it is not you. You are not your trauma. You are a complete, full human being who had some bad stuff happen to you. And that stuff affected you, and it caused an injury. But I'm going to invite you to believe with all your heart that it's an injury and not an identity. And that healing, I want you to know this in your bones, healing is possible. It's possible for you to heal the brain changes that happen to you. It's possible for you to change the behavioral patterns that so many of us end up with after living a life with that brain injury. The brain injury produces something called dysregulation. Dysregulation makes it very hard for us sometimes to process information and emotions. They come in funny, they come out funny, and it complicates how we get educated. It complicates the way we have relationships. And we end up feeling really bad and like we're never going to be okay. But you know what? You can become somebody who learns well. You can become somebody who has a good relationship because you are you. You are not your trauma. So my approach is to heal the symptoms caused by the trauma in the past. If you can take your focus and put it on the symptoms, then you've just taken one giant step towards disidentifying from your trauma. When I first started to heal, I was going to a 12-step program for families of alcoholics. And technically, I am an adult child of an alcoholic. That is true. But I'm not really a child, and the alcoholic has not been alive for 30 years, so really, I can't say that I'm affected by that directly anymore. I definitely was hurt as a kid, and I think that did cause some dysregulation and some attachment problems for me, and that all manifested as my CPTSD. So that happened. These things are real, but I was able to heal those symptoms without ever bringing my mom back to life. My mom died about the same month that I went to my first 12-step meeting and that I was also shown how to do this daily practice that helped me so much. You know, that's not a coincidence. Her dying prompted me to go get help for a lot of pain that I had about how it had been growing up and how really neglected I had been and how much she had not been available to protect me from abuse from other family members because of her drinking. So my first 6 months or so going to meetings, I was crying every day, which is normal and healthy. I was telling my story. I was kind of waking up about the seriousness of stuff that had happened and remembering little incidents, and I'd hear other people sharing about it, and I was discovering, wow, I'm not alone. But I think it was at about 6 months, it was like, okay, you know, I really need to feel better now. Now, I had the good fortune back then to be shown 2 techniques that I call the daily practice. If you've watched any of my videos, I talk about them all the time. They help me so much, and that's why I'm always offering them to you. It's a free course. You can get that in the link just below this video in the description section. Daily practice, free course. Takes less than an hour to learn, but it's a writing and a meditation technique. And it saved my life. I learned another way to get my feelings, my negative feelings, like out of here, out of my heart, out of my mind, and onto paper. It very quickly became something that worked about 10 times better for me than the therapy I was doing. And eventually I quit therapy and I continued with this practice of writing. I needed something that I could do all the time. And so one of the benefits of the daily practice done all the time in my early recovery was that it helped me disidentify. Instead of coming in and just being like, oh my gosh, this happened. The year that I got the daily practice, my mother died, my brother died, a person I loved more than anybody in the world ended the relationship with me. I was going through an extremely hard time and I needed somewhere for those feelings to go. Talking about it was making me feel worse. Dwelling on it was making me feel worse. Denying it wasn't even an option. It was so much for me to deal with. I was overwhelmed emotionally. And so then I had a technique where I could get it onto paper. And this is what I've taught now, 30, 40,000 of people here through YouTube who have signed up for my free course. Teach it, and I just get letters all day long that it's helped other people too. I don't know if it'll help you, but the one way that you can find out is to try it. It's very, very simple, very compatible with anything else you're doing. But it helps you to go, I have fear, I have resentment, you get it on paper, and you stop identifying with that. It's not that you're denying your feelings, but you're not identifying with them anymore, and you're not identifying with what happened to you. And when you have less fear and resentment about what happened to you, you know what comes in? More and more awareness of who you are now. Who you are now is the person who can actually have fun, who can have relationships, who can earn money. You want to be you now. That's who you want to be, is you now. And it just needs to be less painful to come into present time and get out of the memories and the fantasies of the future. And fantasies can be negative too. You can be very afraid of the future. That's a fantasy. So getting caught up in, oh, the past was terrible, the future's dreadful. You can't be the person who has fun and is alive and makes money and moves around and eats peaches. I'm talking about peaches because today the ripe peaches came out and I'm just like, yay, my life just got one notch better. I love peaches. Here now is where you want to be. You don't want to be identified with your trauma. You are not your trauma. Number 2, don't give away your power to heal, okay? You're thinking, I don't give away my power to heal, but here's what I mean by that. I get letters all day long from people who are angry that people who hurt them haven't apologized. Therapists they've seen have not figured out how to make them heal. Doctors they went to didn't understand trauma. Now, I am so sorry that this is a world where it's so hard to get understood as a person with CPTSD. And for right now, that is just a fact. You go to the doctor, chances are small. Even if they say they know what it is, they probably don't. At least they're beginning to do these little tiny trainings for people. But what they teach them may not include stuff that's relevant to you. For example, dysregulation. So few clinical professionals know really what dysregulation is. Not just emotional dysregulation, but nervous system dysregulation that is really the root cause of almost every symptom. When they notice that we say, oh yeah, no, I'll definitely quit smoking. I know it's bad for me, and then we fail to do it. See, they think we don't care. But actually, we're too dysregulated. And stuff like cigarettes and a lot of addictions actually are ways that we can temporarily hold on to a little bit of regulation, even though in the end it sabotages dysregulation. I know that's why I smoke 2 packs a day. By the way, I have this sheet that you can download and give your doctor, and it's called 12 Things I Wish My Doctor Understood About CPTSD. I'm going to throw that link down in the description section too, so you have that. I think a lot of people have found that helpful, and it's really exciting. More than 1,000 doctors have downloaded it. I'm very psyched about that. You just have to have patience with the world right now. You're the one who's forging ahead like a pioneer to learn about what this thing is. And once you hear the symptoms and you go, that is what I have, you're the pioneer. You're going to have to turn around and educate people around you, and half of them are not going to want to know. A lot of clinicians are going to feel challenged or threatened because you think you know what's wrong with you. I wouldn't even bother. If you can possibly get to the really cool doctors and therapists who are yeah, I want to know what it is. Yeah, you read something helpful? Tell me what it is. I would like to know more. That's a good doctor, by the way. People who want to know more, who don't consider themselves to already know everything there is to know. And especially when it comes to CPTSD, Those of us who have it have a unique perspective, and we need to be at the table when people are trying to figure out like what to do about CPTSD. So I've just found a lot of like formal programs out there. They do many things well, but it tends to be more the things that are obvious or that you can see from the outside. And they don't understand the sort of inner workings. And the key thing that I often don't see is the dysregulation of just understanding how when a person with CPTSD gets dysregulated, like triggered and upset, the reasoning goes down. There's this temporary inability to really think straight and a temporary intense emotional feeling. It comes back and we can train ourselves to kind of keep it in balance. So that's what we're doing here. So when I say don't give away your power to heal, I mean don't waste all your energy on being mad at the world for not understanding you, because you've just given them your power. Like, come on, world, heal me. Come on, doctor, why haven't you healed me? Come on, well, this therapist, they didn't get me at all. Well, they can't, all right? That information about what we have is only beginning to be published. Everyone with CPTSD who heals from CPTSD is going to have an opportunity to communicate effectively and change this consciousness. You know, in 10, 20 years, this could be a very different thing. And maybe then I can retire. But until then, I'm teaching and teaching and teaching. Like, this is what it feels like to have it. This is what is known about it. And I'm not the end-all be-all of what's known about it. I try to keep up with things. But mostly I'm a person who has it, who's learned how to treat it in myself. I treat myself as sovereign. Sovereign means the queen, or king in your case, perhaps. I am the sovereign of my own healing. And I hire help from consultants such as doctors, therapists. I don't do therapy anymore, but I would if I thought it was a good idea in any particular thing. I hire their professional help to help me with a project of healing that I'm in charge with. This is my ship. I'm the captain. And if something's not working for me, I stop. And if I'm curious about something, I try it. I ask questions. But I take charge of that. And the reason I've had a lot of success finding what works for me is because I tried 1,000 things. I tried and tried and tried. I tried many things that weren't helpful to me. I tried a lot of things that are very helpful to other people, but not for me. I used to just feel terrible, like, what's wrong with me? It's like, nothing's wrong with me. We're each a little different. The way we manifest our CPTSD is a little different. This is not a perfectly measured science yet. We learn what works for us by trying, and we learn to do that in a boundaried way. And so stick around this channel to keep learning, like, how do you do that? How do you keep learning how you can identify your triggers, how you can calm them down? And you will be amazed at how much power you actually have to make your life change because you develop the ability to calm your triggers. Your triggers are what empower every bad thing about CPTSD. They make you get dysregulated, they make you get disconnected, they make you act out with self-defeating behaviors. Triggers are the problem. So if you can start to notice, whoops, here I go, I'm getting triggered, stop, I'm not gonna say stuff, I'm gonna refrain from trying to solve a problem when I'm triggered and dysregulated. I'm gonna get myself re-regulated, and then I'm gonna proceed. I kid you not, you can change the course of your life by using tools to catch yourself when you're triggered, get re-regulated, and then proceed. And everyone will be grateful to you for that change in you. They might pressure you in the moment, like, oh, this is such a nuisance having you have to get re-regulated. Yeah, well, don't listen. They really, they'll realize soon enough that they didn't really like the dysregulated you. But you're gonna have so much more success in anything you try to do, whether it's to keep healing yourself, to be creative, to make money, to have a family, like all the things that you might be desiring in your heart to do start to become accessible to you when you have mastery over your dysregulation. That comes from you being sovereign, all right? It's very unlikely somebody's gonna just like plop that in your lap. You can heal whether or not your insurance covers treatment. You can heal whether or not you have help, professional help. You can heal whether or not the professional help you have is with people who understand it. You can heal. You can do this. So that's number 2. Keep your power. You own this. This is your healing. The third mistake that people make about CPTSD, not to make, don't keep talking and talking and talking about the past. Now, isn't that funny? Because for basically the last 100 years, people who had emotional or psychological problems were told, you need to talk about it. Do you have someone to talk to? Why don't you talk to somebody good about that? That is just common sense advice. We were all raised on it. So what happens if, like me, you ended up finding that when you do go talk to somebody about it, you don't get better. And in fact, you start to feel really upset and stressed when you try to talk about it. Well, now we know. That is not true for everybody, but with CPTSD, it's fairly common. And it's dysregulation. Once again, it's dysregulation triggered by talking about trauma. And that's how trauma works. When trauma is lingering in your nervous system, yes, it can be triggered and set off. It can be set off by seeing something, smelling something, right? Hearing something, and it can be set off by talking about it, revisiting the memory. And it turns out that talking about a memory uses a certain pathway in the brain, and somewhere on that pathway is that little trigger. But it's possible for you to communicate what happened to you, to visit it, communicate it, share it with another person. You can do that without talking about it by writing about it and then reading what you wrote. All right? James Pennebaker at University of Texas, Austin, has done decades of research on this. He was doing it not necessarily about trauma, but about the therapeutic value of writing. And it's surprisingly powerful when people are writing about thoughts that bother them. Well, here at Crappy Childhood Fairyland, we use a specific writing technique called the daily practice. And it's specific. And the specific technique involved writing fearful and resentful thoughts, asking for them to be removed, and then following it with meditation. And I just want to say, this is very different. It's very different than talking, all right? It's very different than journaling. Journaling is about recording those thoughts. The techniques we use are about discarding those thoughts. They're about getting them on paper so you can stop thinking them, get rid of them, trusting that anything that you actually need to remember or do or respond to that's visiting your fears today is going to come back to you. Your mind is merely going to get clearer, not blank, not empty, just clearer, so that a lot of the free-floating anxiety and things you don't actually need to worry about, they evaporate. Some things you do need to worry about, like, wow, I forgot to make my follow-up appointment at the dentist. I've got to do that. Or things that are even more crucial. So when you have a clear mind that's not all cluttered up with fear and resentment, you can remember better, you can prioritize better, you can even make a conscious decision about how you will use your mind in a given moment. Like, that's really weird. The first time that happened to me, I didn't even recognize it. But basically, when you're dysregulated and CPTSD has hold of your thinking, you're never really in charge of what you're thinking about. You know, you're trying to use it. Somebody says, here, you know, fill out this worksheet. And you go, okay, and you start doing it, but very quickly your mind is wandering. Or you're sitting in a group of people and people are having a discussion and you're listening to them, but very quickly your mind is wandering. And usually it's going inside to fearful, resentful thoughts. What does she mean by that? Hey, these guys are friends. I think these people all have plans for lunch and they didn't invite me. So these little hamsters on the hamster wheel are just going, going, going. And you can barely or partially only pay attention to what's going on around you. And that's going to limit your happiness, it's going to limit your effectiveness and participation in life. Instead of talking about that trouble, you take it to the paper. Now, I love these techniques because they involve a pen and a paper, and in so many settings there is nothing weird about sitting there writing on a pad of paper. You can do it in the theater, you can do it in the office, you can do it on a train. Nobody bats an eye. You're not just standing on your head or doing some funny eye-catching technique. You're just doing something that nobody notices. But privately, what you're doing is you're releasing a bunch of fearful and resentful thoughts that are cluttering your perception so that you can think clearly, you can have lucidity, you can have calmness. Those are the fruits of when you stop talking about your trauma. Now, I don't want to knock it. It is necessary to talk sometimes about your trauma. It's so important to tell your story in whatever form you decide to tell it. Almost everybody's healing begins with acknowledging what happened and telling at least one other person, this is what happened to me. Some people write a book. Some people join a group. Some people go tell a therapist. Some people finally tell a spouse. It's all good that we do it sometimes, but it's just that when it goes on and on and on, it can be fruitless. It's not the way that all of your healing is going to come. And I think that in a lot of cases, for the last however many decades, therapy has been set up on the assumption that if you could just keep talking about it, you would eventually have a breakthrough. And I assume a lot of people have had that breakthrough, or else there wouldn't even be therapy. I mean, it's so prevalent. It's still so, it's like what insurance pays for when you need help. So there must be something to it. But for me, going and talking about my trauma doesn't help me process anything. It like sort of freezes up my ability to process information. I remember the therapist would write down some goals we wrote down that this week I'm going to something. See, I can't even remember because when I'm dysregulated, I can't form memories. I really can't use any good thing that happened in there. And mostly I would just go in there and cry, and the distress would accelerate and amplify. The more I talked about it, the more upset I got. And good therapists tried to figure that out and make the most of it and help me. And eventually I would always just quit. I'd give it a try, 2 years here, 4 years there, 11 different therapists, but it was just the same every time. And finally I learned. First I learned this technique to write my fears and resentments, and it worked. And then I learned the science about why that might be. That writing about trauma and reading what you wrote to a buddy or somebody who also does this, that's something you'll learn in my course, in my free course. If you can read it to somebody, you can get relief in any time. You don't have to wait for a weekly appointment. You have relief at your fingertips. You can have this pad of paper in your purse all the time. Pen and paper, just with you all the time. Folded up paper in your back pocket. You always have it. You can have it by the bed. You can have it in the car. Pull over and discharge those triggered feelings that are coming out. And that is how you can calm your triggers. So that's why I say don't keep talking about trauma, about bad memories from the past. You can use a mix of methods, part talking, but also part writing, maybe some somatic body type things. A lot of people use exercises, yoga, dance, martial arts. There are many ways to relieve your dysregulation. You can learn about those on my website at crappychildhoodfairy.com. Number 4, don't use isolation to control your triggers. A lot of us end up doing that. If it's not like complete isolation where we go off and be a hermit, we find a way to keep everybody at arm's length. Don't do that. You need other people to heal, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because if you have CPTSD, one of the most difficult things is needing people. Dealing with people and all the dynamics there can be so triggering and so expensive for us. It can cost days of dysregulation just to have a little friction with somebody. And so it's like a prison. If you end up using isolation to keep that dysregulation at bay, yes, it's a temporary fix, but so many of us have ended up isolating through years. And you know what happens when you isolate all the time? You get a little bit weird, okay? Take it from someone who knows. It's really important to stay connected to people, even though it's hard. And how you can do that is take it a little at a time. A little at a time. You don't have to throw yourself in and join this deep club that meets every day. You can do a little at a time and use short things. If connecting with people is something you need to develop a little bit, I do have a course for that, the Connection Bootcamp. So I keep plugging courses, but they're all down. I'll put all the links down there so you can find some support for that there. But you don't want to stay isolated as a way to control your triggers. What you want to do is learn to control your triggers whether you're around people or not. That's your freedom. If you know that you can control your triggers, you're going to find very quickly that you have true social mobility. You can go to a party if you want, because you know if it starts to just get totally awful for you, you know what to do. You have tools to deal with it and stay, or you can leave. You don't have to get so completely jammed up and paralyzed with fear about how am I going to deal with it. I better not go. So those days are over for you now. You have freedom because you have tools, all right? Number 5, don't try to make other people control your triggers for you. All right? Don't give them that power. What you want to do instead is you control your triggers, and then you have freedom to hang out with anybody you like. It's so tempting because it feels like when you are triggered and when you have PTSD, it seems so much that other people are causing the trigger. So let's say you go on a couple dates with somebody and they say they're going to call and they don't call, and you go into a great big abandonment depression over it. Then when they do call a day later than they said they would call, you're raging at them. Well, and then they don't want to go out with you. What just happened there is you're making somebody else responsible for your trigger. That rage feeling or that panic or that abandonment depression that came from somebody not calling when they said they would, I totally know what it's like. It's very intense and severe. But it's CPTSD. It's not actually caused by the other person. So you could, if they would continue to see you after that behavior, which they probably might not, but if they were, it would also be tempting to say, don't ever not call when you said you were going to call. We've dated 2 times, and by now you owe me this commitment to call when you say you're going to call. Well, it doesn't work. It's an attempt to control other people. But worst of all, it's outsourcing the responsibility to not get triggered. And no matter how much other people try not to trigger you, it ain't going to work. It's not going to happen. They can't really control whether we get triggered, because if it's not calling you when they said they were going to call, it's going to be something else. If you're just sitting there like a ticking time bomb of triggers, sooner or later it's going to go off. And you know what? Good, loving, healthy people, they don't want to get in trouble just for, being who they are. Nobody wants to be criticized for being who they are. So your job in dating is A, to work on your triggers and keep them calm, and then B, pay attention to the way people treat you. If somebody not calling when they say they will is a bummer for you, then maybe you don't want to go out with that person. I wouldn't go and tear them a new one over it, because you just met them. You're always going to get better results when the triggered part is something that you own and you take responsibility for. And the connecting with other people part is where you're not giving them responsibility to keep you untriggered. You can ask them to meet you halfway on things that you want in the relationship. You absolutely can. You get to have boundaries, but you don't give away the power to trigger you or not trigger you. Yes, there are a few exceptions. Let's say somebody has a spider phobia. Could they not just put tarantulas in your face? Okay, I think that's a reasonable way of saying, could you not trigger me? I have one. I have a deal breaker thing. I say, you cannot tickle me. I was tickle tortured as a kid, to an extreme degree, and I can't stand being tickled. And I kid you not, if somebody tries to tickle me, and it's been a long time, but if they do, I can almost not control my impulse to punch, kick, to fight it like the worst thing. If anybody's close to me, they know darn well, do not tickle me, not cool. You get to have exceptions to that.